Greetings, my friends, and my name is David McLeod, and I am your life mastery coach, author of the wonderful little book, A Life to Die For. I'm also one of the co-authors of the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. I want to welcome you to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and I hope, fulfillment. This is episode 211, and the title for today is Unlocking Our Selves. So from the moment we are born into this physical world, most of us are conditioned, shaped, molded, influenced by countless external forces. Starts with our parents or immediate caregivers and rapidly expands to include our teachers, ministers, leaders, and other people who are told anyway, have authority over us. The messages we receive during these indoctrination phases may be phrased using all kinds of different word structures, but they all can be summed up in one overarching Uber message. You do not have the wherewithal to lead a happy life on your own. Your only chance to achieve fulfillment is by depending on us. Yeah, not exactly what we want to hear, but since we start taking in these messages from a very early age, and because we are trusting souls who would never doubt the word of our primary caregivers, we tend to buy into these stories. And before long, we are well on our way to a life that, for most of us, or maybe just many of us anyway, is only marginally better than simple survival. Nevertheless, we put on a smile, we tell ourselves we're happy, and we continue to live according to the prevailing cultural norms and expectations we've grown accustomed to. Until one day we wake up to a deep yearning in our hearts, a longing for something that is missing from our lives. We may not be able to put our finger exactly on the real issue, but we have this deep knowing that something's not quite right, that we've taken a wrong turn, and that a major course correction seems inevitable. So for this episode of Life Mastery TV, I've invited back an integrative quantum healer and spiritual guide, and also one of my soul empowerment co-hosts, to share some of her experience on this topic. Decades after being told as a child to shut down her spiritual birthright, she went through her own awakening process and reclaimed that very special part of herself. So she has a deep understanding of what it takes to break the chains of old belief systems. So please welcome my friend and colleague, Kristi Borst, back to the program. Hey, Kristi, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's really good to have you back on the program. I know we see each other at least once a month anyway because of soul empowerment, but I think it's really nice to have you here on this show as well. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, David, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Sorry for my little throat clear in the off-camera time there.
Nah, that's okay. Hey, look, I'm going to be doing the same thing. This is what happens as we get older, as we go through different seasons in our lives, different things happen, and we still have a life to live. So, hey, come on, let's just live and love each other and just be gentle. It's great. So you're welcome here, and so is your raspy voice. So.
That old throat chakra.
Yeah, there you go. So now, I guess I'd like to start by asking you a little bit more about this shutting down your spiritual nature experience. I'm sure that many people can relate to it, but tell us a little bit about what your story was like.
So I think for most of us, as you mentioned in the intro, there are subtle and not so subtle messages we get, which kind of lead us to believe we're either not enough or too much, and that's really never the truth of us. And so I kind of see these twists and turns that we take in our lifetime as a kind of soul growth hide and seek game of the higher soul.
That's good. Yeah.
Which, really shows up for different people in different ways according to what, the soul journey is. And for me, right now, in this now, I am standing in a connection with Source, God, all that is, that allows me to help other people release obsolete programming, fears, and stories that cause pain and disease in the physical body, and also that kind of mental unrest that can make us feel stuck. And that is something that I was born with. That is something, ultimately I think I am here to share, but that hide and seek game came about when I was just a toddler.
Right.
In my awakening process, which started probably in about 2010, I had a number of readings, psychic readings, and they would always say, you're a great healer. And I'd be like, okay, that's great. And I am good at healing myself. If I get a physical wound, I can heal it very quickly. So that's what I thought they meant. But then in early 2012, I had a reading, and this time the reader said to me, you're a great healer, right? I said, I guess. You're a great healer, right? This went back and forth like about 10 times. Finally, I said, well, if I am, I don't know how to get there from here. And he said, that's because when you were a child, you did a healing and you shocked the bits out of your parents. And when he said that, David, I had a flashback to that memory. And the kind of funny part of it is that, so what happened, let me just kind of go back just a little bit. So what happened was I was playing hide and seek with my brother, and my dad had made us almost like a Fort Ticonderoga kind of playhouse that had kind of rough hewn, felled trees as the construction. And when I went around the corner into that, I scraped my cheek. Mm-hmm. And my dad came up to me and he was like upset. And so I basically like healed that boo-boo, and which he freaked out more and told me to never do that again.
Oh, wow.
And so through the years, like every once in a while, I'd have this memory of myself as a child tracing my hand on that particular log and tracing on my face. And I think it was that part of myself knowing I had to anchor something.
Right.
But I would have that out of context throughout my life. I just remember that thing. So anyway, in that moment, I basically said, whatever happened then, this is now. If this is who I am, if this is who I am here to be, I rescind any contracts I made to shut this down. Beautiful. And things started coming back to me. They already kind of had, but that really kind of opened the floodgate because I had a piece to my puzzle that I didn't even know that I was missing.
Right. So that's a beautiful story, and there's lots of great pieces here to acknowledge. First of all, you mentioned the word programming, and I want to come back to that. But I think you also just talked about contracts. Mm-hmm. And that really is a powerful word too. So in a sense, you were honoring your own contracts that you had made, or maybe your soul was honoring these contracts. And you then, the you and the soul and all this, it's hard to say who's who right at the moment. But I think that ultimately your higher self, I'll put it that way, was what said, that's it, I'm rescinding these contracts. It's time to start over and allow this energy to flow back in again. Uh-huh. So in a way, when you use the word programming, for some reason, I just have the image of Neo in the Matrix, and trying to find his way out of that programming scenario. And I mean, I really don't think that it's that hard for us to do it, not once we learn how to do it. However, the problem is we first have to be aware that we're stuck in the program and we have these contracts. So I think that's what's beautiful about what you just said there is that you said, well, I'm not sure what these contracts are, but I rescind them all. I love it. That's what a way to clear everything out in one fell swoop. That was awesome.
Well, in my case, I can clearly see that I was a very good girl. I was a very obedient girl. And so when my father said don't, I didn't. And I shut down that part of myself so much that I forgot it was there.
Yeah.
So that's why I had such force within me, because I think that for many of us, we go the path of least resistance just as a way to survive. And yes, that serves us. And yes, that's in a way healthy for us when we're in that situation. Oh, I'm getting full goosebumps on my head here. Uh, um, but we don't always realize what we're giving up when that happens. So
Absolutely true.
that's at the core of really my work I do with people now, is helping them to become aware of what's hiding, what they've shut down. And as far as, programs, I mean, really some of the things you mentioned in the beginning, those indoctrinations, it's almost like programming.
Yeah.
We call television programming. It is programming. It's beliefs served to us over and over again, which are not necessarily true.
That's right. Yeah, that's that. I mean, there's so much great stuff here. It's hard to tease it apart. One thing I would like to say is I just want to go back to what your father said to you. I don't know how old you were at the time. I imagine you were, what, 5 or 6 years old or something like that. Is that
I
right?
think it was only about 3, actually.
Okay. So now, when your father said that, he may have looked to you. You're a small child at 3 years old, and he's this big, tall guy. He may have looked like he was really upset with you about something. And you then took that in and all that energy that he was expressing and interpreted it as, oh, I did something wrong. And therefore, you tried to fix yourself.
Right.
Today, as you look at that, I'm sure you can recognize that your father probably wasn't concerned about you at all. He was worried, oh my God, if the neighbors find out that my daughter could do this, what's that going to be about me? Are they going to label her a witch? Are they going to do some weird crap like that? So now you could probably understand where he was coming from. Whereas back then, oh, I'm bad, or I did something wrong. Isn't that interesting how that just a
Yeah.
perspective shift can change everything?
I love that you brought that up, David, because I think that's been one of the biggest life challenges I've had, is that I didn't understand about protection, if
Right.
that was real or imagined, right? But I mean, this was 1961, so
Right.
there were some kind of wacky things that happened in the 50s, right? But I heard that not as you're bad, but even deeper than that, that even your father, or even my father, who is like the apple of my eye, cannot love me for who I am.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
But that still translates to an inner meaning, self-directed message saying, I'm not lovable. Yeah,
absolutely.
and I know how painful that is, because I would say every single human being on the planet experiences that at some time. I'm
Right.
not lovable. I'm not good enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. Whatever. And unless you're a complete psychopath, which the psychopaths are pretty rare, so you probably, almost every human is going to feel that. So everybody knows what you're talking about when you say it, and everybody can relate to it. And so now, I guess what you said you did was you tried to take the path of least resistance and find a way to continue to express yourself that wasn't going to hurt other people or have a negative impact or whatever. And so basically, you were just finding a way to navigate through the world.
Right. And for me, the mind, the mind was the thing that was treasured. Um,
You mean
so
intellect specifically? Yeah.
intellect, scholarship,
Right.
scholastics. So that is what I poured myself into. And
And so you
as,
got a PhD, didn't you?
that's right. And so, I think that ultimately I had to unlearn a lot of the things that I had accepted as valuable and important in order to get into the space that I'm at now, where I'm doing things that are beyond our knowing, our seeing, the scientific proof, but miracles often come from, that magic space in between black and white.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think what I've noticed as I was listening to you, I mean, how many of us go out and strive to achieve certain things in order to appear credible or smarter or better than we really are, or than we think other people see us. I mean, I did the same thing. I've got a PhD as well. I did that because I thought that will give me credibility in this space of coaching and life mastery coaching and stuff. I've gotten lots of certifications for the same reason. I'll tell you, it hasn't made a slightest difference in my business. Ultimately, people are going to accept you for who you are, not for necessarily what you've done. That's really what it boils down to. And it's a hard lesson to learn. I'm almost 70 years old now, and I'm still dealing with all these issues. And that's part of the reason I do this program, is because I want people to know that we're just ordinary human folks living our lives, trying to do the best we can, and we bounce into or run into these struggles all the time.
I think that's a good point. And that's a program, but that's a cultural program. And it's really pervasive in our world. But basically, that unless you're doing or achieving or something-ing, other than being, right?
I like that.
if you're not doing, you're not valuable. And I'm totally living like almost like not the opposite of that, but maybe that in better balance with being intentional about how I'm feeling and the vibe I'm creating for myself, which then spills out into the world, and creates that vibe in the world. So, I totally get what you're saying, but I think that all of us have to go through our own path of discovery and balance and awareness. And you kind of mentioned earlier about programming. Like, you can't really change something that you're in the midst of if you're just kind of on autopilot. And Spirit kind of shared this kind of phrase with me, which I love. I've been using it for years now, but awareness equals the power of choice equals the power to change. So we first have to become aware of something. Then suddenly when we're aware, we can see, oh, wow, I don't even have to do that. I can do this or that or the other thing. Exactly. And then that's what gives us the power to change. So change is always possible when we're in that space of presence and awareness.
Right. I agree with that. I will go even a step further. Change is inevitable. Change always happens. It's just that we're not always aware of it because we don't allow ourselves to just simply be in the moment. Sometimes and here's something else that I've thought about. Ultimately, I think the only thing that keeps us from being present is fear. And it's usually, fear about something in the past is going to happen or, come forward and, cause us some kind of an effect, or fear of something we don't know about in the future. That's really the only thing that can stop us from really being present and being fully aware is our fear. So how do we deal with that? Well, I think from my perspective, the answer is become aware of the fear. What is it you're really afraid of? And most of us, if we are honest with ourselves, and we allow ourselves to understand the deeper fear that lives within us, we may come to a conclusion that, well, what I'm really afraid of is disappearing and not existing at all. Not just dying, it's just about suddenly vaporizing into nothingness, as if I never existed. I think that most people, if they take it to the deepest level, that's where they get to. And that can be a terrifying thought. And it's all coming from ego. Because the soul knows I'm never going to not exist.
I love that.
Yeah. I see we got another visitor. Welcome, Carol. You're welcome to communicate on the chat if you like and share with us your perspective. And so go ahead, Kristi, you were going to say something.
No, that's okay. Sorry. I think that, if we think about ourselves and our physical bodies, and we know we have like individual fingerprints, right? A lot of these things, it's almost like we each have our fingerprint on them. So when you talk about, kind of that fear, the fear that kind of motivates us to act a certain way or hide ourselves or even be sick. It's as unique as our fingerprint. And the work that I'm doing with inner child healing, I think is so valuable, because when we find these, what I call root wounds, for me, for example, I spoke about how, I read the situation that even my dad, who I love, he's like the center of my world. Even he can't love me and accept me for who I am. So that story or that wound still plays out in my life. It served to me in different arenas, but now I'm watching for it. Now I can say, oh, there's that story again. You almost got me that time. Nope, not gonna, it's almost like you can kind of see where it's going to lead you emotionally. And I believe, as these spiritual beings having a human experience, we want to have more experiences. So why the heck would we go back and do that thing that makes us feel like shit again and again and again? So
well, we'll keep doing it until we don't do it anymore. Yeah.
Or we die and we never saw it.
Yeah. It's an interesting challenge for sure. This idea of these, I think you called them hiding places, where we hang out I'm not even. No, I'm going to let you talk about hiding places, because I have my own perspective that might be the same or it might be different than yours. So go ahead and you talk about your hiding place.
So what I think is that these things that have been our challenges, yes, there are hiding places, and what they're hiding is our greatness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, it's like sometimes the things that we feel the most self-conscious about, the things that, have caused us the most pain, when we really dive into those, that's where we can grow the most. That's where we can really, throw that fear bucket out, because when we see the illusion, that's holding maybe the illusion of whatever that story is the container, right, of the fear. And when you like burst a hole in that, like it just can elevate your whole awareness of yourself, your place in the world, your way of interacting with everybody. So I think it's important to, I know you call it's shadow work. I call it, inner child work, whatever you call it. It's really a wonderful opportunity that I don't know if other generations before us have had the time, the money, the wherewithal, talk about being so entrenched in a do, cogwheel system. We are changing it up, baby.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. First of all, you said something that I think is very, very important, and something that I just don't want to let it go by. You talk about how in our hiding places there's lots of greatness there, and I think that's absolutely true. I think that, yes, I call it shadow because we're putting it into the unconscious, into the background, and trying not to look at it under any kind of light. But it still is alive, and it's still active within us, and it still tries to come out sometimes from sideways perspective. And when it comes out sideways, it usually creates chaos and confusion and various other kinds of problems. But if we can come to that place of understanding that what we have put into shadow, we did that for a reason that made sense at the time. And maybe it was to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe. Maybe it was to protect somebody else. It doesn't really matter. The point is, we were doing it from a place of love, even though we might not necessarily recognize it as that. If we think about, oh, I was afraid that this was going to happen. Yeah, there might be some element of fear in there, which allowed you to put this in the background in the first place. But you were also doing it out of a place of love. And most people don't recognize that. So consequently, they keep their shadows hidden and refuse to allow them to be shown in public under virtually any circumstances. And so the way I interpret the hiding place thing is, what I do instead is I show up as a nice guy. I show up as a joker, a clown. I show up as somebody to try and make you like me so that you don't see that stuff that's in the background. That's how I interpret the notion of the hiding place, if you like. So it's really like I put my representative out there rather than being out there myself. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I just wanted to kind of tease this out a little bit. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think, there's something that came up when you were talking, which is, if you're always trying to push things down, it's very, very, very stressful. It's heavy. It's draining. It's the total opposite of actually illuminating those dark places, because it's hard to put some of this into words, but when one of these wounds comes and knocks on my door, I'm glad, because I know that it's gonna lift me as I lighten it, as I heal it. I'm going to get more comfortable in my own skin. I'm going to feel happier. I'm going to just be proud of myself that, I'm not, I don't know, it's hard to put it in words, but it's really like you go from victim to, the playwright and the actor, the playwright, the stage set designer, everything. I don't know, I just can't encourage people enough to really, if you feel uncomfortable in your own skin, it's almost self-sabotage of who you're here to be, because you're here to be you, and you're the only one that can do that.
That's right.
So, that's a whole nother thing.
Well, and that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? We're talking about finding a way to unlock that real you.
Yes.
Rather than the persona that you're trying to present to the world. I mean, we are all going to have some level of persona, no matter how elevated we become in our consciousness. But sooner or later, the persona and the truth will start to get closer and closer together until they merge. The more work we do, it's a kind of, it's an evolutionary process, right? And that's why I always tell people, enlightenment is not a state; it's a process.
Right.
So remember that. I just wanted to acknowledge Carol's comment here. I think she's referring back to when we were talking about the fear and being in the past and the future and so forth. She said, when I experienced that I am not the body, the freedom I felt was beyond anything words could express. The fight or flight survival mechanisms that kick in no longer had a stranglehold on me. It gave me the freedom to be and do. That's beautiful. I think that's something that all of us can learn from. You know, when you release that thing, you allow yourself to just be who you are. You know, and then the doing comes from a truthful expression rather than from a false expression of who you're pretending to be.
And that's kind of illustrates another one of those programming sidetracks, I guess I would say, of, you know, you only have one life to live. Well, you know, I don't believe that at all. In fact, I know that that's not true. It's not true for me, and I don't think I'm really special. So, you know, I'm sure other people have, you know, lived again. So, you know, when we kind of see that, you know, we have eternity to understand things. And this has brought me so much peace, is that there's things that people have done to me, who loved me, who I don't understand it. But I know in time, with capital T, in time, all truths will be shown to me. I'll see the contracts that we were playing out. I'll understand the backstory of maybe what I did in another lifetime. So yes, I think becoming more spiritually aware can help us to evolve and live as a happier human. I did make a note that I wanted to just mention something you just talked about, brought up judgment for me. So for me, you know, that thinking that my dad doesn't love me, who else is going to love me, right? So that's a lot about judgment. And that's a lot about worrying about what other people think about you. And in that time from 2010 to 2012, when I was just, you know, reading and watching videos and just doing so much self-growth, something I read talked about, or maybe I think I heard somebody say, what other people think of you is none of your business.
Right.
And, you know, I took the time to like ask, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? And so I started to see how when we judge someone else, it's something that we're feeling insecure about, that we're maybe kind of jealous of them in a, you know, in a non-aware way, or we want to aspire to be like that, but we're afraid.
Oh, yeah.
Or we see ourselves and we're not ready to face that. So I started to realize that judgment isn't bad. You know, when someone else is judging me, it's their wounds or their journey, you know, knocking on their door. But what I have to be aware is when I judge someone else, because that's my stuff. That's telling me about myself. So that has been, I don't know, that has been life-changing for me, to have that one awareness.
Right. That's a powerful thing, and something that I think is extremely important. I talk about this a lot. You know, judgment is just an externalized form of projection. That's all it is. And in fact, a judgment does not have to be negative in order to be a judgment, because you can judge something. I'll tell you this. I actually think that there's really no such thing as data. There's no such thing as raw data. There's simply our interpretation of what we observe. And so when you and I have a conversation and I say that guy's wearing a red shirt, and you in your mind say, no, it's not red, it's orange. You know? So what is the actual data here? In fact, it may not even be a shirt, you know? So what we have to do is we have to think very carefully and speak correctly. What I should be saying to you is, what I see over there is a red shirt. And you say, oh, interesting. What I see over there is a green Christmas tree, you know, or whatever it might be. Neither one of us is wrong, and well, we're both right, because unless we're lying, of course. But I think if we're both speaking the truth, then we're just sharing our own perspective of that. So judgment is really everything. Judgment is interpretation, it's conclusion, it's evaluation, it's all those things that we do all the time. But I do want to say this. When the judgment is accompanied by charge, some kind of a negative emotional charge, like you've got a trigger that's activated within you, it's so easy to say, you, and to put the blame for that charge on some external source. That is what we have been conditioned to do.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's 100% wrong. In reality, that trigger is entirely 100% within me. And if I'm going to be a mature and conscious individual, then I have to take ownership of that and take responsibility for it and do my own healing. Now, if I can do that in a way where I can share with you what my judgment and my trigger are all about, you might be able to hear it and say, there's a grain of truth in there for me too. Because just because my judgment about you is really about me, some of what I say might be true for you. And so it's beneficial if we can learn to exchange those pieces of information with each other. I could say to you, Kristi, I've got this real charge. I'm really upset about blah, 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 and I need to clear this with you. Are you willing to stand and hear my charge? I know it's about me. I know it's not about you, but I want to share it. And maybe...
That's beautiful.
Can you imagine what our life would be like if people would do that? So it's a difficult thing to do, because the ego mind is not going to allow, it's just simply let me do that. The ego mind is going to say, you, but my soul is going to say, no, me.
Right. Well, I do couples work in addition to individuals. And one of the tools that I like to share is to allow the person to express what they heard, which may not be anything related to what the other person said.
Exactly right.
So, for example, if you said, I don't even know, I can't even think of an example.
Well, there are so many between us.
Say that, you said to me, Kristi, I can't have you, on my show again for 6 months. If I were charged with that, my wound, which is, people don't accept me for who I am, I might say back to you, David, what I'm hearing you say is that I'm a little too out there for you to have me back on the show again until 6 months from now. Is that am I hearing that correctly? And then I've shared with you what my kind of not funhouse mirror is that's distorting what the message is coming to me.
The funhouse. I love it that you put that there. That's hilarious.
Once you see the distortion and everything, then, it's just like, okay.
I like it. The mirror, the hall of mirrors. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yep. That's beautiful. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Another comment from Carol here. She said, when my teacher told me that what another thinks of me is none of my business, it set me back on my heels. It meant that I had to let go of the self-importance program. And I think that's exactly right, Somebody is saying something about me, that means I'm so important. Yeah, right. And, it's true, I think that, let's face it, we all like to hear good things about ourselves, and probably none of us like to hear bad things about ourselves. But it doesn't matter whether the things we hear about ourselves from another person are good or bad. It's still not about us, it's about the other person. And most people can't accept that. It's like I talk about feedback sometimes. If I have some feedback I want to offer you, let's say that you were, I don't know, practicing your trumpet or something, and I heard some notes that I didn't like. If I gave you feedback, it's not about you. Even if ultimately you take what I'm giving you, and maybe it helps you to improve, all of that feedback, no matter what I say, is about me. And people really have a hard time with that. No, it's about the other person. I'm just trying to be constructively critical. Yes, of course you are. You're trying to be critical. Forget the constructive part. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm talking too
That's
much
right.
here.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit.
Uh-oh. I don't know what happened there, Kristi, but your video seems to have frozen. I don't know if you can hear me, but please come back on, because I like to know what it is you'd like to talk about. Meanwhile, Carol, you and I can have a conversation. Yeah, she dropped off now. I hope she comes back. I think this is a really fascinating conversation. Oh, there she is. Oh, there you are. Hang on. You have to unmute. Hang on. Your microphone is not coming through. Did you leave completely when you did that? Because I can't hear anything. Now it looks like your microphone is disconnected. Try to reconnect your microphone on the little. Now you got it. Woohoo! Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Now you wanted to say.
Oh my gosh. So what I was, what I wanted to just kind of circle back to was the ancestral programming.
Right.
And I'd like to talk just a little bit about kind of even like physical illnesses that we think of as hereditary. And I feel that there is an opportunity now to look at some of the ancestral programming in the non-physical aspects of ourselves, mental conditioning, beliefs with, I like to do that belief with lowercase b, e, capital L-I-E, small f, there's lies in our beliefs. So one of the kind of exciting things I had read about when I was in my sponge learning phase is that quantum physicists have discovered that DNA is not a concrete pillar. It's actually changeable, and there are almost like on-off switches that can be manipulated by our environment, by our food, by even our beliefs. Studies in stress have shown this a lot.
Right.
That the way we're feeling affects the way we're feeling. So I encourage people to really not own any predisposition for an illness and to look at what the underlying energy is of that illness and watch for ways that they're vibing to that misinformation, I guess I would say. And I can give examples if you'd like, but I'd like to give you a chance to talk back.
No, I agree with you. I think that, well, okay, so I want to just separate these ideas. First, we have the ancestral programming versus the whole notion of physical well-being, physical disease, and all that kind of stuff. I think they are related, but I think they're also two separate topics. So let's deal with them one at a time. In terms of disease, I think it's obvious, actually, that certain diseases can be transmitted from one person to another, but only if the body of the receiver is receptive to that disease. And what makes that body receptive to the disease? Well, maybe it does have to do with your spiritual awakening, with your mental state, with your psychological state. You talked earlier, quite a while back, I think, about the idea of stuffing stuff, putting stuff and kind of squashing it down. I was actually going to make a comment about that, so I'm glad you brought that back. The idea is when you push stuff down, especially the energy that you don't want to allow out because you have some negative judgment about it, that energy has to go somewhere. And if you don't allow it to express out of your body, then it's going to be repressed into your body.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's repressed into your body, it can become toxic. It can become So toxic, in fact, that it can manifest in all kinds of ways, including cancer. So if you have a disease of some kind, it's useful, as you just suggested, to look into your own history and say, well, how did I invite this into my life? Maybe, I didn't consciously say, come on in and, have your way with my body. No, I didn't do that. But what I did do is I shut down this belief. I shut down that. I tried to stop this behavior because I thought that, this is going to make my life better. And all it's done is it created a place for this stuff to live. So there's that aspect of it. What do you want to say about that?
I just would like to say that, if we think of our soul as energy that comes into this physical body, and the physical body is amazing. It's got all these, amazing mechanisms and programs to heal, but it needs our soul in it.
Oh, no. You froze again, Kristi. There she goes. She's dropped off one more time. I hope she comes right back. What I want to say is I agree. The soul or the body needs the soul in order to survive. Now, try again. Can you talk? Nope. We're having a lot of fun today. I've heard some interesting things about this month, that there's some weird stuff going on all around the planet. Anyway, you keep freezing. I don't know what the best solution would be, Kristi, but maybe just completely shut down your browser and restart and then come on back.
Yeah, so I'm sorry.
Oh, now I can hear you.
You can hear me, but you can't see me?
Yes, I can hear you. You can try, you
Okay.
can just try talking for a while. You can try coming back on camera.
Okay, so what I was saying, and just thumbs up if you can hear me. So if we've got an old emotion or, a self-limiting belief or, even like, something that is a storyline from our ancestors stuffed in a certain part of our body, then our spirit, our life force energy, whatever you want to call it, it's not able to fully flow, almost like blood flow, in that part of the body. And that is what takes the amazing body systems offline. So I'm kind of realizing I'm getting a little bit off topic here.
No, it's perfect. Don't worry. It's all good.
These things that, these wounds that we're stuffing or we're hiding or that are keeping us from being ourselves, they do affect our physical health because it's changing what our soul signature is. And that changes how the soul interacts with the body, how the body interacts with the world, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. And by the way, don't worry about going off topic. We're not off topic. We're talking about unlocking ourselves. And that means we do whatever we have to do, including opening up, as you say, opening up the flow of the life force using whatever tools we have available to do that. So I think that's very, very important. You're still, your microphone is offline. Now, while you're coming back on, I just want to go back to the ancestral side of it. This is an area that I find fascinating. People have different perspectives about the whole reincarnation thing, and the passage of DNA and other forms of energy from one generation to the next, and so on. So there's all kinds of different perspectives, and I think they're all perfectly valid perspectives. Just different ways of looking at things and different ways of perhaps explaining the kinds of experiences that we tend to have as a collective.
Okay. So you want me to respond to that?
Yeah.
So I think it can even be, things that we've carried forward from other lifetimes. I count that as ancestral beliefs as well, or ancestral programming. So, there's things that are brought through, even through the DNA, I believe. So it's about really kind of looking at the bloodline. What's our weakest link? What does that telling us, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically? And I think, you mentioned briefly cancer earlier. Cancer, I think, is a big feedback that you're like vibing so much fear. And, it's really kind of catch 22, because once you get cancer, then of course you're fearful. But, I think that some diseases will, kind of like you said, it depends on the person and their receptivity. Some of these things won't even take hold if we're not running those fear vibes in our body.
Right. Yeah. And that's the same thing holds true, I think, with ancestral programming too. Part of the problem with this whole notion of things being passed down through DNA, to me, that is a physical connection. From the spiritual perspective, I believe we are all, what's the word I want to say? We're infinitely immortal. We are alive forever. This physical experience that we have is just a temporary blip on the timeline. And some of us may have many such experiences. I know of people who claim to have had reincarnation experiences. And I know that there are people who maybe haven't had the experiences themselves, but they believe in reincarnation so much that they teach about that. Now, I personally have never had any kind of a life experience that led me to believe that I lived in a previous life or anything like that. I'm not saying that doesn't mean anything. It just means I cannot remember that kind of experience in my life.
Yeah, and I have had that experience. So,
right.
Yeah,
so that's, and all I'm saying is each of us is going to have different combinations of experience throughout our lives or life. You mentioned earlier that sometimes we're told you only have one life to live. And you said you don't think it's true. And I say, well, even if it is true, there's an infinite variety of things we can do just during this one brief time on the planet.
Right.
And we can learn so many things. We can learn from our mistakes. We can grow. We can try all kinds of different things, and some will work for us, some might not. But ultimately, even in just this one short time span, we have just a huge variety of experience.
So I do want to give one example. So there's a whole volume of work by Louise Hay about the mind-body connection, and I'm in alignment with a lot of her thinking. But for example, sometimes the actual physical function of the body can tell you what the energy underlying the illness is. So, for example, for our legs and our knees, what do? They carry us forward. So, for a lot of people, knee problems are about a fear of the future. So, to illustrate, like if my grandfather had knee problems and my father had knee problems, I could think I'm going to have knee problems because of DNA, but it may be more so that my grandfather taught my father that life is hard and you have to struggle and you're going to have to, work until the day you die and, not have food on the table and, all this programming that really is supporting that belief that allows the knees to not have what they need. So that's kind of just a little illustration of how the non-physical can affect the physical.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Carol just mentioned, I feel and have experienced that we come into the world predisposed to the conditioning of our parents and caretakers. We absorb them, so to speak, in that we absorb their history. Yeah, I resonate with that statement. Yep. I think that summarizes kind of what we've been talking about here. So I guess what the bottom line that I'd like to get to here is what do we do to break the programming, disconnect from the conditioning and all that other stuff, and really unlock ourselves so that we can become the true magnificent beings that we were intended to be?
I think that
Oh God. I think you got to stop prefacing your statements with "I think that," because that's what's causing this thing to glitch. I think that, and then you freeze. It's funny. Yeah. Oh, coming back on. Come on, Kristi, you can do it. Get back on.
do you ever feel that somebody doesn't want you to talk?
I'm not even gonna entertain that thought. Okay, now you're muted again. Try again.
Okay, how about now?
Yes. Now don't start with "I think that," because that's what's causing the problem. My opinion is.
Oh, I
Go
don't
ahead.
even remember what I was going to say.
Well, I was asking about how we can actually
Okay, yes.
do the
So
unlocking. Yeah.
I think it really does take self-awareness in the now moment. You know, we talked about past, we talk about future, but you've got to be present to what you're experiencing and take a look at what is pulling you away from joy, away from happiness. And again, look for those awareness equals the power of choice equals the power to change. You've got to get yourself off of the pain train and onto the, yumminess train by just really observing yourself. Um, I like to think about having like a drone that can kind of watch what we're thinking, watch the stories we're telling ourselves, because that neutral observer has the power to make new choices.
Yeah. I'm not sure I want to invite a drone into my life, but I get the metaphor. That's a good metaphor.
Yeah, but you're the
I want to
drone.
say this. I think that here's been my experience anyway. Simple observation I have found very, very challenging in my life
Hmm.
because I like to describe it this way using this metaphor. When I stand out there and just look at the clouds, at first, all I see is clouds. But then after a while, I start to see faces and bunny rabbits and various other things in the clouds. I'm no longer seeing clouds. I'm engaged in some kind of a self-entertainment process. So I'm no longer observing, I'm interpreting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really challenging thing, I think, for many people to do. And so what I have to do is I have to catch myself when I get into those little story loops. Oh, I'm seeing rabbits. Wait a minute. I just want to look at the clouds. That's all I want to do. Just observe the clouds and try not to make up any story about it. So I bring myself back to the present moment by doing that. Now, that's just one little trick that I do. Do you have a trick like that helps you?
I have a kind of a process that I offer on my website for getting out of your head and into your heart. And I think, if you get out of your mind and you almost imagine that, kind of on your chest, your nose is there instead of up here, and you just really focus your breathing, or become aware of your breathing in your heart space, then you can start to disengage from those stories a little bit more. But it's kind of, I think, more just the awareness that you want to change. You want to go from actor in a story to playwright. So I think that has to be almost like the first switch of
Right.
saying, okay, I'm done with this.
Yeah. I'm done with this. Yeah, it's time for a new story. Time for and that's another thing that I like to tell people is, well, you have a story, but you are not your story.
Exactly.
And if you allow yourself to get stuck into the previous belief that I am my story, well, guess what? There's no ending. You've stopped at whatever has happened so far. But if you allow the
Mm.
fact that I simply have a story, then you can allow new chapters to be written. And this gives more opportunity for extra experiences, extra growth, extra opportunities in life.
Right. And that what's coming to mind, David, is I've seen a couple people recently posting on social media, oh, such and such was the best time of my life.
Yeah,
You know, like that is so much a self-defeating belief and program of who you're here to be. Because
that's right.
really, you've got infinite potential to be anything, everything.
That's right. That's another great lesson. We've got to stop using, superlatives. And in fact, comparisons are probably not that helpful. Saying this is good, this is better, this is best. Uh, it doesn't really help us. All it's telling us is, well, I have a preference for this right now. That's all it's really saying. It's not saying that this really is the best. It's just, this is my preference in the moment. Tomorrow, I might think that this other one over here is the best. And just be aware of that possibility. That's
Right.
really where we start releasing ourselves from our traps,
And I think even saying, why do I think this is the best?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, is that something that somebody told me and I'm just carrying it forward? Or is this really what I feel, what what resonates with me?
Right. Well, as Carol says, it's easy to get stuck in the nostalgia of memories, which are often distorted anyway. Going back to your house of mirrors,
Right.
this is how I remember it. Well, yeah, maybe it didn't happen like that at all. So anyway, Kristi, this has been just really awesome. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I want to thank
I'm
you for
so
being here.
sorry for the technical problems.
No problems. Now, without using the phrase, I think that, can you tell us a little bit about, what words of wisdom would you like to leave everybody with before I close out the show?
Awareness equals the power of choice equals the power to change. As we heal one, we heal the whole, and we are lifting one another.
See, just like that. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for watching today's program. Remember, you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. I just want to say this has been an awesome experience. I mean, we've talked about a lot of great stuff here today, and all about how to really get in touch with the truth of who you really are and to start bringing that forth in everything you do. And that's really what unlocking your true self is all about. So I invite you to practice that over the coming weeks and months, and just keep growing, my friends. Also, I want to invite you to remember to practice my Life Mastery mantra every day. Remember, it goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. Yeah, look at that. So until we meet again, I want to wish you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. My name is David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach. See you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.